I'm going to give an example. Y'all tell me petty or not.
Okay, let's play this. I like this game.
This is an example.
Petty or not.
Because I made the statement
petty or not, here I come. You can't hide. Woo, gonna find you. And okay. Welcome back to Sam and Jen Got Divorced. We have another great episode for you. I'm Jen. This is Sam.
I'm Sam?
You're Sam.
Okay.
I'm Jen. Our marriage didn't work, but maybe our podcast will. We are here with another great episode. We've got a special guest. I'm going to let you introduce our special guest today.
Yes. So this is our friend, Valeria. Thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited. I'm excited to get into it.
Yeah.
The topic is going to be, why are people petty? Okay.
Maybe it's a good thing maybe we can define what petty behaviors are, if we have sort of a universal definition. Yeah. I look at petty behaviors as unnecessary ways of acting, reacting, or treating your partner or the person you're in a relationship with during or after relationship. So like low blows, insults, or just like doing mean things, like keying cars and calling, children to tell them that their mother's terrible, or like just petty, unnecessary things. And I think people act in those ways during and after relationships because they're hurt and they want the other person to feel just as hurt as they feel. Mm-hmm. I really do. And I think it boils down to a lack of skill, inability to express themselves well, or in non-harmful ways in order for them to get what they need and get what they want. So that's my general sort of definition and opinion when it comes to like petty behavior.
So I'm thinking of a very specific example. So Genevieve and I were having an argument about something that I do not remember what we were arguing about. Mm-hmm. I definitely was the person who got more emotional, visibly more emotional, more of the time. So what happened in that situation was what happened a lot in our marriage, which was I was trying to communicate dissatisfaction or displeasure with something, and Genevieve just wasn't being responsive in the way that I wanted to see or hear. Mm-hmm. So we lived on I think the 18th floor of a building, right? And when Genevieve was just really cold and like she was just unresponsive to me trying to express my dissatisfaction or displeasure, she had a little plant, right? That we had a plant, but I didn't care about the plant. She did. So I picked up the little plant and I threw it over the balcony and I walked out of the house. And like we didn't her face. She's still thinking about that.
So petty.
Not proud of that, but that was an example of me being petty. And
right? You understand? Before me. Forget the plant. Yeah. No, I'm joking.
That's the most important.
It was like, yeah, it was.
The plant didn't do nothing, right? So I could have handled that better in a lot of ways. Right. But for me, it was I wanted to get back control. I wanted to get my comeuppance, right? I felt like I was being hurt, disadvantaged, and I felt like I lost control. Like I didn't have a control of how I wanted to feel or how I wanted the relationship to go. Mm-hmm. So at least this would mean that now I have the upper hand somehow. She's not in control because her plant's no longer in the apartment.
Yeah, and to your point, and I think that brings out another great point. Mm-hmm. You can only be petty toward people that you know, because only he would know. Like that was the only living thing in our apartment. It was important because my Auntie Mavis gave it to me. So it was like dear to my heart. Like it's a gift from her, and it's there. It's a living thing, and I just like plants and the outdoors and whatnot. But he wouldn't be able to hurt me with that action if he didn't know that, right? So our vulnerabilities and our important, close to the heart type of information, that's the only way people can be petty with us, right? So people have to be petty in close, intimate relationship context. Mm-hmm. I feel like, well, maybe, I don't know if that's true. I'm saying it out loud now, and I'm wondering how true that is. But I'm like, how in the world can you hurt somebody that you don't know?
I think you still can.
Yeah, that's
I think it's pretty possible. But
you
well,
can.
in
That's
this
good.
case, I'm wondering if Samuel, if when you were younger, you have ever experienced like a lack of attentiveness towards your emotions, whereas like in that moment it kind of resurfaced or it triggered something for you to act in such way.
I don't know if there was one thing, but I growing up, I definitely had trouble managing my emotions, and definitely through many temper tantrums. Right, that was a normal thing in my household. Yeah, that's a good question, but I can't think of one specific instance that made me think, oh, if I do this, if from now on, if I throw a temper tantrum in some form, then I'll get a sense of control. The closest thing that I could see is that in my house growing up, sometimes my parents would lose their temper, and it seemed like the reason that they were doing it was because they wanted a sense of control, and they got it to some degree, because when one person loses their temper, the other people kind of have to back off, otherwise the situation escalates, right? And sometimes they don't back off, but in the experience that I had was when somebody lost a temper, our whole family was like, okay, now we should probably chill, not make the situation any worse. Like, there's no point in engaging at this point. So I think I probably internalized that to some degree and replicated that without even realizing. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense, especially because as kids, right, like you tend to absorb what you have in your environments, and just whatever it is that your parents may do, like it may show up in your future relationships. So how are you both able to overcome that situation in afterwards?
Yeah, I think that's a great point as well. The fact that pettiness can be learned. Pettiness can be learned behavior. I don't have a personal experience with pettiness that I can identify. I am, from what I know of myself and how I've presented or been or shown up in relationships, I can't think of times when I've been petty. So I don't have, that's not my personal MO, to be petty, just to hurt people for the sake of hurting people. And I think I would probably err on the side of shutting down and like pretending everything's okay versus lashing out and trying to hurt the other person. But I do think pettiness comes out in protest behavior, right? So it's like, hey, pay attention to me, see me, know me, feel what I'm feeling, like that kind of temper tantrum, like adult temper tantrum maybe. But yeah, I don't think, I can't think of, and I can think of, I can think of other people being petty, but I can't think of myself acting in petty ways. I don't know, maybe you have an example.
Yeah, I have some examples.
Yeah, because I'm like, was I ever petty? Am I petty? I don't know.
I agree with you that you, by and large, were not petty. Like, the way that you lived life was not petty. I don't think actually the way that I lived life was petty too. I think I
don't think so.
I had to get to that level. And I think you were almost never petty in actions, but sometimes were petty in words.
Okay.
How does that land for you?
I'm sure it could be true, right? Like I don't have a personal reference.
Okay.
I have no personal examples actually of like being petty. Yes, direct. Sometimes my words can be harsh, like cutting or biting, but it never to me it never comes from a petty place. It doesn't come from a I'm trying to hurt you place or like a just mean for no reason place. It comes from like an honest place. But I do realize that you can be honest without being mean or rude or insulting, and maybe not insulting. I don't think I'm insulting, but I do recognize that sometimes I'm extremely direct and like, sort of hit things on the head. It's not like an opinion-based thing. Like, I don't like your jacket. Who cares? Like, am I wearing the jacket? Right. Like, it doesn't matter. Right. But if he says, oh, like, does the color look good on me? I'd be like, no. Whereas someone else might be like, well, you were harsh. People might say that. Or someone else might say something like, well, perhaps you could wear a different color that might bring out your eyes or something. But you asked me a direct question. I'm going to be like, no, I don't think so, or whatever. But I don't think that's petty unless I asked him a question about my shoes earlier and he said he didn't like my shoes and I'm trying to get back at him. Right. But that generally doesn't happen.
I feel like it also depends on the perspective, right?
Absolutely.
And something that comes up for me also is I find that as women, sometimes we can be dismissive about like towards a man's feeling or emotions that they may have. And sometimes that can come off as petty, even though in that moment you're just not being self-aware of the situation.
What would be an example? I think I agree with you, but what would be an example of that?
I think there's times when a man expresses something to us and we tend to minimize it, but in that moment it's because we genuinely think it's not a big deal, and in that moment it feels as though that person is just being petty because they don't want to see eye to eye with them.
Yeah, and I think pettiness, again, it has to do with intent. Like, I could be like, here, let me give you a bottle of water, and to the external eye it could look like I'm being nice, but I know he has a full bladder and he's trying not to, and that could be petty. You know what I mean? So like, I think it's really an internal process to determine like what is petty. You know? I don't. Yeah, I know. I even said, I said it out loud, and I was like,
the
I don't know.
intention behind it, what you're doing, like your core belief, right? It's how you're.
I think it's definitely. I think it's both. I think, people can look at some things and identify it as petty, but I also think that there is an internal sort of intention aspect to it.
Okay, so I'm gonna give an example, and then maybe y'all tell me petty or not, right?
Okay, let's play this. I like this game.
This is an example.
Petty or not?
Because I made the statement.
Petty or not? Here I come. You can't hide. Woo, gonna find you. And okay. Go ahead.
So petty or not?
That's awesome. I love that.
Okay.
Petty or not?
If you all like this, we can play this game in future episodes as well.
Petty or not?
So I have a friend. Let's call him Phil, right? And Phil is not a small guy. He's not even a medium guy. He's a larger guy,
He's a big fella.
Yeah. He's a thick king, right? So his wife is also of African descent. Genevieve is also of African descent. One through her parentage, one parent Caribbean, one parent is African. So I had a conversation. A bunch of us boys were coming together, and we talked about how, it feels good to have African wives to make sure our bellies are full. And I talked to Genevieve and I told her about the conversation, and Genevieve said, Phil really needed an African wife to make sure his belly is full. So I ask you, petty or not?
What was your intention?
That's a good question.
Yes.
That's the real
I
question.
think that's a valid question. Does he really need an African wife to make sure his belly's full? I'm sure that he had a belly full before his African wife came along. So I think that's just valid curiosity and exploration of the facts behind his thickness as a king.
Fair.
I think it's a fair question, and I'm gonna vote not. It was not petty.
Why did you find that it would be petty, or that it was petty?
I thought, again, looking at intent, I don't think Genevieve's intent was to be petty at all. Like, it wasn't about control. It could have been phrased in a way the result was that it diminished somebody else to a degree, right? Like, yes, the man is big, right? The man is not small.
I guess you're saying that because you find as though it was a little bit sarcastic. Or was it something else?
Maybe sarcasm. Yeah, there was some sarcasm added to the statement. Right? Like, yeah.
Okay. So, and even as you said, that actually didn't cross my mind. But I probably said it in humor or in jest. But
I did laugh.
Well, it's funny.
Yeah.
But the truth is that we, as a culture, we actually normalize sarcasm and sometimes degrading people in jest. Right. It's comedic,
right.
And
ourselves.
Absolutely. And I think we accommodate that, encourage that, and accept that in our relationships as well, in our marriages. Like, how many times have you sat down in conversations with your girls, with your boys, or with couples or what have you, and people are like, oh, my wife is such a cow, or oh, my husband's such a messy guy, or whatever. Like, people are saying really like insulting things about their spouses, about their loved ones, and people are laughing like it's a joke, right? It's culturally acceptable behavior. We don't have a culture of of like honor and uplifting and, you know, what's the opposite of criticism? See, I don't even know the word. Complimenting, right? We don't necessarily have that because it doesn't go over as well as criticizing or tearing people down. It doesn't go over as well. So we've learned in a lot of ways to do that in order to function within our social context, right? You're there, you're joking, you're laughing. Oh, look at and we're jesting and all that stuff. And even girl crews and girl groups, they're like, oh, you're such a B, my da-da-da-da. And I've never subscribed to that. I'm just, I recognize and believe in the power of words. Right. And so am I going to be the one to tear you down? Probably not. Like it is highly unlikely that I'm going to be that one.
Right. Like,
right.
As human beings.
Oh, absolutely. But what I'm saying is that I don't think that that approach, like, jesting or insults or whatever, I don't think that is as unacceptable as it should be in the context of relationships. Like, pettiness is okay. And I mean, we see it on television, sitcoms, and whatever. Girl gets, you know, I don't know, she gets overlooked or whatever. She goes and she keys his car and her girls are like, you better do that. And like, what is that?
Do either of you have siblings? Yes or no?
Yeah.
The reason we pause is because
I'm like,
that's a complex question for Genevieve.
Okay.
Yeah, sort of.
Did you grow up with different?
What's the what? Go ahead.
Just wondering, because I feel as though it goes back to how we grew up. When a loved one, right, they speak to you with disrespect, then you grow up believing or thinking that that's okay, and so you do it, and you also accept it, and you reciprocate that type of behavior with your relationship, right?
Yeah, I mean, I can see how, like, family of origin rules and, you know, sort of your model, I guess, can influence how you decide to show up in spaces. But I think at a developmental stage where you're learning how to function well in social context with friend groups, I think you will defer to what's socially acceptable at the time. And I grew up in a generation where people, and we're still in the generation where people are just allowed to say all manner of craziness to one another, and people laugh. And it's fun and it's funny and it's okay. I could say, I think you are great, and people will be like, oh my goodness, words of affirmation, love language. Like, let's commodify this. Let's write a book about this. This is fascinating stuff. No, it's not fascinating stuff, right? This should be the norm, but it's not. I mean, we have to recognize what context we're in. It's not the same across the world. That's the way it is here. Yeah. Like you mentioned my dad. My dad is a West African man. West Africa has a culture of honor. They have a culture of like honor, education, excellence, all that kind of stuff. Like, they don't go around, oh, you're such a bee, and they don't do that. They're like, my king, right? They still bow, right? Madase, Akwaba, like, you are welcome, like, you are home, you are family, right? You are mine, you belong, you're honorable, you're human, you're a person of dignity, requiring and deserving of my respect. But here, I mean, you'd be hard pressed to walk down the street and people look at you and say hello, like you don't even exist. Yeah. Right? This is the space that we live in, and that idea is reinforced over and over and over again, which allows for pettiness to just like be an okay thing.
Right.
Like that's actually the like, if you're not petty when you leave a relationship, you didn't leave it right. That is the prescription. You need to be doing something, saying something that's off the cuff.
You're saying that's the norm here.
That is the norm here. Okay. That is the requirement here. It's like, what did you do, girl? How did you? What did you say to him? Right. Did you take his money? Did you key his car? Did you? And then you're like, no, I just left amicably. Yeah.
And I feel as though that as well comes down to having like a good foundation, even spiritually, right? Because if you're in tune with yourself and with God, then you would recognize a lot of those things that are part of our flesh and why
And-
we act out of desire.
Yeah. Yes and no.
What would you
I mean,
have to
I think
say
people,
about
I honestly, I think people will do what you allow them to do. And that's just it. Like, a lot of people don't have a benchmark for how they are going to behave. They take energies. They're like, well, if you show up this way, I'm going to match your energy. You show up this way and you cuss me out, I'm going to cuss you back. I think we do our best. And I think under normal circumstances, yes. But we're talking about relationship demise. Like, that brings out the worst in people because it's painful. We are created for relationship. And so when there are relationship breaks or attachment breaks, we go crazy, right? We want to reconnect. We want to reclaim. We want something. We want something in replacement of our investment. We gave you our time. We gave you our energy. We gave you our lives. We want something in return because this wasn't supposed to end. You weren't supposed to leave. I don't know why I'm yelling.
No, that's real. It's raw.
Like, it's really loud. Okay, we're just going to bring it all the way down.
We feel destabilized, so we do anything to feel a sense of stability.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, attachment breaks are the worst. The worst. Like, you're taking away the very essence of how we are and who we are and how we function. Right? This is who I am. Like, I'm in relationship with you. Like, that. And you're tearing that away. Plus, it's not what I expected. So I poured into this expecting a ring, a marriage, a child, a future, a this, a that, a next thing, whatever. And now you aren't following the rules. In fact, you're breaking this contract. And so we're going to have to figure out how I can reclaim the terms of this contract.
So with that being said, how have your perspectives on accountability and emotional intelligence evolved since your divorce? Would you approach things differently now in terms of the pettiness and Samuel? Anything that you may have done to
Yeah.
Our hope is that by sharing our mistakes and what we've learned from them, be supporting healthy conversations in our communities. So if you're enjoying listening to this, do us a quick favor, like, comment, and subscribe. It's not only encouraging, but it helps us in tangible ways get you on the next episode, family.